Welcome to the Inside Digital Transformation Podcast. Inside Digital Transformation explores how organizations of every size and shape are using technology today to survive and thrive in the face of relentless change. If you are a business or technology leader charged with making the most of digital transformation in your organization, then this podcast is for you. And now here's your host, Alan Bernard, a technology journalist, editor, and copywriter who has been covering the intersection of business and technology for over 2 decades.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. In this episode, I'm speaking with Mike Fulton, Senior Vice President and CIO at Vernovis, about the next wave of digital technologies that CIOs need to be thinking about today. These are the so-called DARQ technologies: distributed ledgers, AI, extended reality, and quantum computing. Because all of these will build on the SMAC technologies, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, that have gotten us to where we are today, their impact will likely be much greater than even SMAC has had to date. The key to making the most of these technologies will come down to seeing the forest and the trees to understand where and how these technologies can be applied to solve business problems. Well, hi, Mike. Welcome to the show. I really appreciate you making time for me.
Sure, absolutely.
I'd like to start off every podcast, or most of them anyway, with people's definition of digital transformation. And I think for this one, since we are talking about obviously kind of the next wave of technologies coming down the pike, that'd be good to get your definition of what digital transformation is.
Yeah, so I'll start with what I talk about to my class. So for the audience, I teach a course called Managing Digital at Ohio State. It's a course for fourth-year seniors, right before they graduate, the last thing they need to know about IT before they go into the workforce. And I also teach to exec ed, to mid-career professionals trying to upskill for the digital world. The definition of digital I use in my class is leveraging technology and data to transform business models and customer experiences. Okay. Now, there's a couple of key elements to that definition that I like to highlight. The first is the importance of both the technology and the data to the conversation. A lot of times when people think about digital, they focus on the technology elements versus anything else. But in today's day and age, the importance of data is elevated to such a high level that it really can be transformative to a business to properly leverage all the data that we can collect in new and interesting ways as part of the digital transformation process.
And you don't see that happening? I mean, data-driven decision-making, and, in the way I look at it, to your comment, is technology is actually in service of data, right? Data used to be the product of technology, but now I think that paradigm has shifted, and without data, there is no point to technology today in many regards, right?
I think that in a lot of instances, that's very true. Definitely, technology and data need to go hand in hand and can be both key parts of the conversation. The other piece, though, about digital that I really like to highlight is this idea where digital is impacting business models and customer experiences, right? So the big shift here that has come about with the digital age really is that we're leveraging technology differently than we have historically. For the last 50 plus years in the IT field, we've been leveraging technology inside our companies, inside the span and the scope of what we can control to impact our operating models, to impact our business productivity. We've been doing a lot of that work with technology. And because we are focused inside our companies, we have a lot of control over what goes on. The shift to digital, though, is really taking technology and focusing its use outside our company, on our interaction with our customers, on how we actually make money as a company. And when you start to do that, as an IT organization, you actually lose control, right? Now, we don't control what the customer wants, what the customer needs, what the customer thinks and feels. We don't have the control over how customers work the way that we used to internally in our organizations. And so what it fundamentally means when you think about applying technology and data outside our company is we have to think about new ways of working, right? The metaphor we used to use historically within IT was the metaphor of a manufacturing line, right? In a
Sorry, you broke up there for a second, Mike. A manufacturing what?
The metaphor of a manufacturing line, right?
A manufacturing line. Okay.
Right. Gotcha. So we always think about, we know what the inputs are going to be. We have a very clear process. We know what the outputs are going to be on a manufacturing line. And that was the metaphor that we used for years and years and years when it came to the IT factory. Well, when we think about the digital factory, what we're really needing to do now is we have to start from a different starting point. We use a different metaphor now. The metaphor is now of an R&D scientist rather than a manufacturing engineer, right? The difference here, because we don't know what our customers want and need, we have to experiment. We have to research. We have to understand. We have to try things out, right? And so what that does is it creates a different way of working, a way of working that really is driven by more of an R&D mindset, by the scientific method, by experimentation. And that's where a lot of the newer techniques, Agile, DevOps, Lean, some of the lean
product
innovation,
focused, right, versus
product
project
focused design, right. All of those things are really being driven by this shift in how we're using technology and the fundamental change that's part of digital.
Well, it's a nice segue too into the whole idea of this DARQ, right? And I think am I pronouncing that right? DARQ, right? DARQ technologies. It sounds kind of evil, but that's right. That's the acronym, like SMAC.
Right. SMAC was the first wave of digital technologies. I was going to say DARQ is an acronym that was coined a number of years back by Accenture, one of the Accenture research groups.
Yes, I found the report actually.
Yeah, and it stands for Distributed Ledger, Artificial Intelligence, Mixed Reality, Extended Reality,
Extended Reality,
and quantum computing.
Right.
And the idea really is that these are the emerging next wave of fundamentally game-changing technologies,
right,
that we need to be paying attention to.
Well, what's interesting is taking each one in isolation. Distributed ledgers, they've been around for a while. I did an episode with Nelson Patrick from formerly of Tibco, now with Board International. But he, we're talking, the killer use case has never really quite emerged for those. It's really interesting technology, but they have some fundamental challenges to them. So they've never really taken off the way the hype cycle thought they would. Extended reality, right? Virtual reality has been around, 30 years? Longer? I don't even know, right? And it still hasn't found its home, right? It seems like. I mean, there's great use cases for it, especially with augmented reality and field services and healthcare and things like that, right? And then AI now, though, may have crossed that Rubicon and found its killer use case, which is interfacing with humans in a natural language, in a conversational fashion, right? Especially around search.
Absolutely.
My God, knowledge, accessing knowledge and information faster and easier can never be a bad thing. Well, you know what? I'm going to back that one up. But it certainly is very helpful to be able. Yeah, I know, right? But then quantum, of course, we'll get to that. But that doesn't seem like it's ready for prime time either. And so I guess why the focus on this particular set of four when the SMAC technologies, right, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, still have years of runway ahead of them, right? And the potential of those technologies is still yet to be tapped in any meaningful way, I think, right? Certainly the combination of the four.
Yeah. So great question. And there's so many different ways that we can take this. The first thing I would say is that while I think we still have a long runway when it comes to that first wave of digital technologies, the social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, I would argue we have gained hugely dramatic benefits from all four of those individually, as well as from the collective, the combinations
together,
of those things.
Yeah,
both in the corporate world as well as in the consumer world. Those have been incredibly impactful on our lives and
Sure.
the way that we work. And I think the reason why the DARQ technologies are so interesting to me is because those technologies are playing in the same space as the ones that came before them, but they're creating, each one of them creates new what's possibles, right? So if we think about quantum, for example, while quantum computing, the promise is unleashing an extended compute capability beyond what we've ever seen before, right? That's the promise of quantum computing.
Yeah, I mean, the promise of quantum is like an iPhone compared to the first Texas Instruments handheld calculator, right? I mean,
Exactly.
It's just light years beyond where we are today.
But at the end of the day, right, cloud computing took us as individuals and as organizations quite a long way down that path, right? Cloud computing gave us unlimited access to compute power with the swipe of a credit card. And so very similar, quantum is just has the potential to take cloud computing to the next level, right? Artificial intelligence. Again, in that first wave of digital technologies, we focused on analytics and being able to leverage data in unique and different ways to drive decision making. Artificial intelligence is taking that to the next level, right? I think the same thing, to some extent, is true with distributed ledger. So, and it's, hang with me on this one for a minute, but if we think about social media, right? What social media was doing was giving power to the people. And I think what we see with distributed ledger is the opportunity to give to remove the middleman, to give value to the people, right? Who is it? Don Tapscott, I think, calls blockchain the internet of value, right? The promise is that it can be easier for people that don't have access to resources to be able to exchange monetary value over the blockchain. The last one, mobile computing, right? If you think about mobile computing as extending and transforming the customer interface from a PC now to a computer, enables you to have that interface anywhere. Extended reality is transforming your primary interface once again. It's taking that interface transformation to the next level. And so you can see the relationship to the previous wave in each of these individual DARQ technologies, but you can also see the new what's possibles that can potentially be created by them. The other thing I think is important to understand is that while we get the impression that technology innovation really moves very, very quickly, I think the reality is actually very different, right?
Yeah, that's my experience too. I'm still writing about stuff from 10, 15 years ago. Cloud, it's still a top 5 conversation in any boardroom.
Absolutely. All of the technologies that we're talking about today were technologies that I talked about with our innovation teams back at Procter & Gamble 10 years ago. And even if we go back to ChatGPT, that overnight success, right? At the end of the day, I think artificial intelligence started and was originally identified back in the 1960s.
Yeah, actually, Alan Turing, if you want to go back far to the original, The Godfather, it was Alan Turing in one of his papers. I forget what the Imitation Game is based on some of it. Right.
So we see all of these things, and what looks to be an overnight success, ChatGPT, is the fastest adopted new technology in history, according to some of the things that we see. But at the same time, it's built on a technology that we've been working on for 60 years.
So with that perspective in mind, I mean, what I think the challenge for CIOs and CXOs, right, CFOs, CEOs, is which of these technologies are we going to invest in? Which of these technologies we're going to pay attention to? Which of these technologies are we going to believe the hype cycle this time around? What do they need to understand about DARQ to see it or envision it in their enterprise or in their organization.
Right. And for me, as a CIO, as a technologist, as an innovation specialist in technology innovation, I think what I would say is your job really is to understand enough about these technologies, where they're at in their life cycle. And I go back to that statement, what are the new what's possibles these technologies are going to create?
Okay.
How do they inspire new things that you could potentially do with your business, right? And then it becomes a mapping back to what's your industry? What are your business strategies? What are you really trying to drive for both the short term and the long term goals and objectives of your business? And then how do those emerging technologies fit with that? How do they support that? How do they create new opportunities you might not be seeing, right? And if you are just looking at it from a business perspective, if you're just looking at it from a customer perspective, the issue becomes you are looking for new opportunities, but you don't necessarily understand what's actually possible, right? We are all very familiar with the technology that we work with, the technology that we understand, right? But when we think about where we want to go, we put our own lens on top of that. So to me, the key as a CIO or a technology innovation specialist, the key is to be out there and understanding enough that you're opening up your mind, right? Without that understanding, you won't see the connection back to how you could impact your business, right? The business needs to, the business strategies, the business goals and objectives needs to be driving the bus. I've seen technology inspired solutions that actually didn't leverage the technology we were bringing to the table. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I used to work in the blockchain space at Nationwide, and I saw this, and several of my friends and colleagues that worked at other companies and also worked in the blockchain space saw this over and over again. We were exploring different opportunities, different use cases that we could leverage blockchain for. And what we saw over and over again was blockchain became a really interesting reason for us to have a different kind of conversation with the business about what they were trying to do. And then at the end of the day, when we worked all the way through the problem and the best solution for the problem, sometimes blockchain was the right technology to actually solve the problem with. But a lot of times blockchain wasn't the best technology. There were other technologies that brought pieces of the benefit to the table at a lower cost or at a higher level of reliability or whatever it was. So while we would create a new solution that would drive the business forward, we might not actually leverage blockchain to be able to create that solution with. So it was a blockchain inspired transformation project versus a blockchain transformation project. I've seen that with many different technologies over the years where people start with the technology first and end up getting to a place that was different than what they expected. And the key for me is understanding that that's not a failure, right? That's a net win for the business when you're able to move the business forward. But if you're looking at it purely from a technology perspective, you might view that as a failure.
You know, I've heard that described as a solution in search of a problem. But I think what you're describing is a level above that, right? If you're looking at technologies and then looking at problems and seeing is there a marriage between the two in some way? Is that
right?
Okay.
Right. And I think the difference between a solution in search of a problem and what I'm really talking about is I'm talking about using technology to inspire us to look at things differently. Versus being dead set on finding a way to use this hammer to pound in a screw,
Right. I think, going back to ChatGPT, it's AI, right, at its core. So that makes it part of the DARQ, universe.
Right.
Kind of a Marvel reference, right?
Yeah.
But, think about a big consulting firm like an Accenture or an EY or something. And hundreds of thousands of knowledge workers toiling away. And one of the big problems for information workers, as you and I both know, is finding the information you need. I mean, how many hours go into searching for information and it's sifting through reports and having to do all of that, where if you had a tool like ChatGPT that you could rely on, right, and that would also give you references and things like that, so you could double check until you actually came to trust it. What a game changer that could be for how these organizations operate, right? And the products and services that they could put forth. I don't want to say with all that extra time, because I think that would be a misinterpretation of it, but it would certainly give knowledge workers a leg up.
Right.
They could spend more time understanding and learning as opposed to searching and finding. Right.
One of the biggest challenges I have seen for people throughout my career has been in creating the first draft. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. We can be talking about an article. We can be talking about a presentation. We can be talking about anything. That first draft, when you've got that blank sheet of paper, you've been a writer.
That's
you are very familiar with this.
Many blank sheets of paper in front of me. Yes. Good.
That blank sheet of paper is the most difficult thing to create from. Once you have something to evaluate, it's much, much easier. And that's where I think for a lot of people, using something like ChatGPT can be infinitely valuable, right?
Absolutely.
Using it to create that first draft, that's a version 0.6, but now you have something to work from. And it's a lot easier to edit, tweak, change than it is to create from scratch.
Right. Yeah. And, I'm doing some research into that right now for an article. And, and that's the consensus today. It's a human augmentation device. But, at the speed of advancements, you got code, machines coding for machines, and, it's still nascent, but things are moving fast. And it would appear that this ChatGPT or these generative AI models, large language models, aren't going to stay all that stupid for very long, right?
I would agree. I think the difference will be, right, these generative AI models will be able to synthesize and summarize learnings. I think that it will be potentially far more difficult for these generative AI models to create net new, learnings that don't exist in the world today. And that's where I think the value of humans will always be, is in really understanding, identifying, and finding the net new.
Right. It will appear to be new. This is the thing. This is the challenge. A lot of the work that I do is meta research, right? And you see this in the pharmaceutical industry a lot, where you have a roll up of 20 or 30 report or studies that are then researched to find some correlation in the findings. And that would be a very good use case for this type of technology, right? Because, I'm not really creating net new, but I am drawing new inferences. I talk to people like you, and based on the existing data, we kind of project it forward a little bit and see where it might be in a year or two, or whatever the assignment is. But again, I think AI could do that pretty well in time, don't you? I do.
I think so. I think about.
But would that be net new learning? Right. That's I guess what I'm coming back to. Would that be right? I don't know if there's an answer for that right now.
That's good. That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. The time will tell, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately. But I mean, but from a CIO perspective, looking to use these technologies today to make their organizations, streamline operations, workflows, extend business processes out to customers where they live, which is where you always want to try to do, right? You want to meet your customer where they are. There's a lot of upside to even using ChatGPT-like capability in today's form with a little human supervision, right? and then use it as an augmentation tool to existing processes and just some of the things we've already discussed, right?
Yeah, I think the thing that's most interesting, right, in this context of the DARQ technologies is that I think AI more broadly and Chat GPT specifically is the one technology where I think the impactful use cases seem to be a little bit more obvious and a little bit more near term. It's the one of the four that we can all reach for today and figure out how to potentially add value to our businesses.
Right.
So
as opposed to, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think with blockchain, the use cases are a little more challenging to find the perfect use case. Quantum computing, the technology just hasn't quite evolved yet. Well, the use cases may be relatively obvious for folks that have studied the space. The technology isn't quite there yet for stable quantum computing. The third one, the extended reality, I think you mentioned field services, manufacturing. There's a lot of good use cases for augmented reality, but some of the other use cases that have been envisioned haven't necessarily come to fruition yet. The idea of a metaverse where we spend all of our days from a personal perspective, or all of our working hours from a corporate perspective in the metaverse interacting with one another, just hasn't taken off yet. We're not quite there yet, but I think we're starting to see hints of that.
Yeah, I mean, the metaverse has a lot of moving parts. I'm not really up on it. It seems a little too far away to spend a lot of time on right now for just about anybody who doesn't have a company named Meta. Ultimately, right? Go ahead.
I've read some leading thinkers that write about the metaverse and what's coming, and the interesting thing that has caught my eye and that I'm watching for has been not Facebook, or now Meta, at the center of that space, but actually Microsoft, and how Microsoft is going to move us into that space in a corporate setting, piggybacking off of the Teams environment. There are pieces that are starting to be put in place through the Teams environment with the video chat, with the collaboration capabilities and whatnot. You can see the potential for those environments to create a natural extension into an augmented or a virtual world, but in an environment that doesn't always have to be just that. Right. It becomes an operating system, a hub, a world that you can seamlessly move between 2D Teams video interactions and text interactions over a chat, and virtual reality 3D interactions. You can seamlessly navigate whichever is the right use case for whatever you're trying to get done. And so to me, that's where I think the metaverse actually comes first, is going to be in the corporate world. And I think it's going to be through Microsoft.
So, okay. I would like to touch on quantum, because it seems to be I'm getting a lot more in my inbox around quantum these days.
Okay.
Now, I did a little research. It's been a bit confusing. I've done quite a bit of research, actually, and it's still a bit confusing whether or not quantum is actually a thing, right? Now, I know quantum computers exist. There's up to, I think the Chinese just came out with one that's 66 qubits, right? Which is meaningless to about anybody outside of the quantum physics world, right? But it just means you can do more, right? The more qubits you have, the more capability you have, right? Just like transistors on a chip, right? But in IBM, I think in 2016, actually started doing quantum as a service with a 5 qubit computer. They had 17,000, according to their blog, people line up within days to start doing research. But I think that was more of a research thing, right?
Right.
But as far as practical applications of quantum in the business world, I mean, these are room-sized machines. They require near 0 Kelvin. I mean, it's insanity how cold they have. They have to be colder than deep space.
Right.
If there's any thermal, they call it, I think, vibration or frequencies, just from residual heat anywhere in the system, it breaks the quantum state. You lose something called coherence. Right. And that can come from X-rays from outer space. Right. So it just seems like a very fragile technology right now that has just an amazing amount of potential with a whole bunch of big ifs in front of it. Right.
Right.
Go ahead and take it from there.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, some of the challenges, right? You mentioned the need for extreme cold to support the quantum state. There's high error rates. Scientists are working through different techniques to manage the error rates associated with what's going on right now. There's the issue of crosstalk and noisy neighbors between various qubits, and some of the challenges that again are helping to add to the potential error problems. And then there's a problem with communications. That communication opens up a channel for heat to get in. So there's a lot of challenges with getting it to work. There's a bunch of different threads that scientists are going down to try to work through and address each of these challenges and making incredibly rapid progress in them. But at the end of the day, when we think about it, right, a quantum computer is going to be good for certain use cases, but it's not going to have a tangible impact on every use case. Some of the kinds of use cases that are going to come into play are going to be healthcare research, trying to map out the genome and some of those sorts of things.
The protein folding problem that DeepMind, I think, was the company in the UK, just finally solved last year, maybe with AI.
Right.
The year before.
Some of the deep financial analysis that firms on Wall Street have to do could be impactful in that space. High
frequency trading. Can you imagine what it would do for high frequency trading? My God.
It's a big space where this could have potentially huge impacts. And that's why I think you'll probably see some of the early investment. Once a quantum computer is viable, you'll probably see investment from those sorts of firms.
I wonder if they'll go the way of the main or become like a mainframe, right? Where you have to have it all in one place and then you just access it from as a service, right?
I think it will, because of the nature of the absolute zero temperature requirements. I think it's going to have to be for all but the largest organizations or the biggest investment use cases.
At least in the early days, right? I mean, that was the early days of computing was all mainframe.
Well, and I think that's why you see companies like Google and IBM leading the way in research in quantum computing. They see that potential to provide those sorts of centralized resources through their clouds broadly to large organizations.
Right.
And that will be part of the value they provide with quantum computing, I believe.
Yeah, and the wild card in all of this, I think, is networking. Right, doesn't get a lot of airtime, but without it, none of this stuff. I don't want to say none of it, but certainly from the use cases that we see today with like mobile, those use cases kind of fade, right? I mean, you really need 5G, for example, to like the high frequency stuff, not the stuff that's available today.
Right. I mean, to your point, when we break technology down to its most fundamental elements, it's compute, storage, and networking are the three.
Right.
And at the end of the day, if you want to progress, all three of those have to move forward, I think. And that's kind of the point you're making here, right? It's not enough to just move compute forward and make the world much faster if the network can't keep up with that. It's not enough to just move compute forward if the storage can't keep up with that. All three of those things have to work together to be able to actually provide the full benefit to us out of technology.
Well, Mike, I think we're coming up on the hour, so thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate your time today.
This has been fun.
If you liked this episode, please tell your friends and check out our other shows. You can find Inside DT on all the major hosting platforms, including Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and Google. Talk to you soon.